I used to live in a tiny studio unit in a quiet part of Portland after I finished college. It wasn't anything special, just one open room on the top floor of a small 3-story block. I picked it because the rent was low and it was close to my new job. At 23, with loan debt and barely a savings account, I didn't really have options. But the place was clean, simple, and most importantly, mine. The only window faced a narrow service lane. Across from me stood a nearly identical building. The alleyway was narrow, barely enough space for a car to pass through, and it hardly ever saw sunlight. At night, it turned pitch black. It didn't really bother me. I was working night shifts back then, bartending at a small downtown bar. I usually got home around 2:30 or 3 a.m., made a quick snack, scrolled my phone, and passed out. One night, about a month after moving in, I noticed something weird. I had just walked in, kicked off my sneakers, and flipped on the main light when I caught a flicker of movement from the window across the alley. Just a twitch like a curtain shifting. I paused. But when I looked again, there was nothing. The window was still and dark. I figured maybe someone got startled, or it was just a gust of wind. But the following night, it happened again. The second I turned on my lights, I saw the curtain stir in that same window. This time, I was sure of it. A hand briefly pulled the curtain aside before letting it fall. I couldn't see who it was. Their apartment was dark, just a slice of movement in the darkness. What really unsettled me was that I'd never seen lights on in that unit. I assumed no one lived there. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking about that shadow and the movement. Over the next several nights, I paid more attention. And sure enough, every single night, the moment I switched on my lights, the curtain across the alley would part, just slightly. It was small but impossible to miss. Always the same. The curtain would slowly open, reveal a sliver of blackness, then close. I decided to test it. Some nights, I left all my lights off and just sat quietly near the window. When I did that, nothing happened. But the second I turned on even the smallest lamp, the curtain would stir. Someone was watching me. That much was clear. I tried to justify it. Maybe someone just liked standing at their window, but the timing didn't make sense. It happened the second I got home. Too consistent. I asked the property manager about the unit across the alley. He told me it was empty and had been for months. I pressed him, asked if someone had maybe moved in quietly. He shook his head and even laughed, saying I was probably imagining things. I thought about reporting it to the police, but it felt silly. No law had been broken, no clear threat, just a creeping feeling that something was wrong. Then one night, things escalated. I got home later than usual, closer to 4 a.m. The bar had a private event that went late, and I was too tired to think straight. When I reached my front door, I noticed something wedged into the frame. At first, I assumed it was a flyer or ad, but when I pulled it out, I saw it was a wrinkled piece of paper. A single word was scribbled on it: "Hi." My stomach dropped. My first thought was that it came from across the alley. I rushed to the window. The curtain was shut tight. No movement. I called my friend Taylor, panicked. She lived on the other side of the city, but told me to come stay the night. I tossed some stuff into a bag and got out. The next day, I demanded answers from the landlord. This time, I insisted he unlock the unit across the alley. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. We met there that afternoon. The apartment was dusty and totally empty. Not a single item inside. The walls were bare, and every step echoed like no one had been there in years. But in the back room, facing my own window, was a lone metal chair. It sat perfectly aligned with the window, like someone had been planted there for hours at a time. The room had no other furniture. The window was unlocked. Whoever it was, they had access to a place that was supposed to be sealed shut. The police were called. They checked everything. I think they took prints, but nothing ever came of it. Knowing I wasn't imagining things, that I was being watched, it made me sick. I couldn't stop thinking about how long that person sat there, how often, how close. I moved out within days. I never found out who it was, how they got in, or what they wanted. That note, just one word, was all they left behind. I briefly wondered if it could have been the landlord, but I dismissed the idea. No way he would have let me see that chair if he had anything to do with it. Even now, I sometimes wake up in the dark, staring at my bedroom window, feeling like someone is still watching me from somewhere. When I was 12, my family relocated to a remote area deep in northern Montana, far from any town or neighbors. Our new home sat on a vast stretch of land surrounded by thick spruce forest. It was calm, quiet, and completely cut off from the outside world. The house itself was an old build from the late 1930s, complete with warped floorboards, a gloomy attic, and a detached, crumbling shed that stood about 30 feet behind the house. The shed was stuffed with leftover tools and scrap left by whoever lived there before. My dad always planned to clean it out, but he never got around to it. Most of the time, we just avoided going near it. I remember the first time I sensed something was off. It was a school night just before midnight. I was under the covers reading with a flashlight when I heard our dog, Charlie, barking like crazy. Charlie was a black lab, sweet, but fiercely protective. When he barked like that, something was usually wrong. I slipped out of bed and peeked out the window. He was in the yard, staring toward the shed, barking nonstop into the dark. The sensor light by the back porch had turned on, throwing long shadows across the grass. I didn't see anyone, but Charlie wouldn't stop. I just stood there, watching until he eventually settled. Then I went back to bed. The next morning, we saw large boot prints in the dirt between the house and the shed. My dad brushed it off, guessing it was a hunter or someone just passing through. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Over the following weeks, Charlie kept barking toward that shed. Always at night, always without explanation. Whenever we checked, we saw nothing, but the same deep footprints would return. Strangely, they always led to the shed, never away from it. One night around 2 a.m., I woke up to the crunch of footsteps outside my bedroom window. I froze. The steps paused, then kept going toward the shed. I lifted my blinds just slightly and caught the porch light flicker on. That's when I saw him. A tall figure stood next to the shed door, wearing a tattered, grimy overcoat. His face was hidden in the shadows. And just like that, the light went out. My chest tightened with fear. I backed away from the window and ran to wake my parents. My dad grabbed his shotgun and stormed outside, but the figure was gone. The prints, however, were freshly made, leading once again to the shed. This time, my dad unlocked the doors and went in. He looked around, but all he found were some rusted garden tools and a few dusty tarps. He replaced the old lock with a heavy-duty one and secured the doors tight. For a while, things went quiet. Then one day, Charlie disappeared. We searched the woods for hours, up and down the gravel road, asked every neighbor within miles. Nothing. He was just gone. I held out hope that he'd come back, maybe got lost and would return. But something inside me knew better. That night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about Charlie, the shed, and that man I saw. Around 3 a.m., I heard the back door creak. I got up and crept to the hallway. My dad was already standing there with his gun, alert. We reached the door just as the motion light flicked on outside. There he was again, standing beside the shed. But this time, he was holding something. In one hand, a long knife. In the other, Charlie's collar. I felt everything drain from my body. It was like my stomach dropped through the floor. Couldn't breathe. My dad yelled and raised the shotgun. But the man turned and sprinted into the forest. We called the sheriff immediately. Deputies arrived and searched the property. But the man was gone. No trace of him. What they did find inside the shed was far worse. The floor had been cleared of debris. Symbols had been drawn into the dirt, crude, jagged shapes that looked almost ritualistic. In the corner was a pile of bones. Animal bones, we hoped. Then they discovered a false panel behind the back wall. Hidden behind it was an old hiking pack filled with items we didn't recognize. Worn wallets, cracked watches, scraps of stained clothing. Belongings from someone, or multiple someones. Most disturbing of all was a notebook. It was filled with bizarre sketches and strange symbols. Pages covered in frantic, uneven handwriting. Some pages had drawings of houses, some of families, Some were just eyes, staring eyes. To me, it looked like a message, something personal, like we were being watched just like others had been. The police collected everything and taped off the shed. That night, as we were packing to leave the property for good, I looked one last time out my window. The wind pushed the police tape back and forth. Everything seemed still. But then, just beyond the shed, about 10 feet into the trees, I saw a face, just for a second. When I blinked, it was gone. I shouted my dad's name, panicking. "He's here," I yelled. My dad ran into my room, saw how shaken I was, and looked out where I pointed, off to the left, beside the tree-line. He didn't even hesitate, grabbed his gun and sprinted outside, firing into the woods while shouting like he was possessed. It was rage, pure rage, the kind that builds when someone violates the safety of your home, your family, takes something you love. We left within days, moved to a small town closer to civilization. I've never gone back. In late summer of 2018, my friends and I, Lily, Jonah, his younger brother Chris, Chris's girlfriend Tessa, and myself, planned a weekend getaway deep in the Appalachian highlands. We were fresh out of college, all in our early 20s, and just wanted to disconnect for a bit. We found a secluded spot way off-grid, buried inside a state forest reserve where the pine trees grew thick. The air smelled like wet moss and bark, and there was zero phone service in any direction. The first night was easygoing. We hiked in with our packs, found a flat clearing near a hidden lake, and pitched 3 tents. We built a fire, roasted hot dogs and s'mores, and watched the stars blink through the canopy above. It was calm, almost too calm, but comforting. The second night changed everything. Around 11 p.m., we were still gathered around the fire when Jonah suddenly stiffened and pointed toward the trees. He asked, "Did you guys see that?" We all turned, but nothing was there. He swore he saw a figure duck behind a tree, maybe 40 yards out. Chris shrugged it off, saying it was probably a deer. But 20 minutes later, we heard a distinct snap, a stick cracking in that same direction. This time it was louder. Lily looked unsettled and said she wanted to turn in for the night. We all agreed. The fire was put out, tents zipped up, and the forest swallowed us in silence. That night, I woke up to something I still can't forget. Slow, labored breathing just outside my tent. Couldn't have been more than 10 feet from my head. At first, I thought I was dreaming, half awake maybe, but it didn't stop. It wasn't just breathing. It sounded wheezy, almost like someone who'd smoked for 40 years. Could have been one of my friends outside, but there was no sound of movement, no footsteps, no zipper noises, no whispering, just breathing. I grabbed my flashlight but didn't turn it on. The breathing shifted from one side of the tent to the other. Then silence. It ended as suddenly as it began. That weird silence convinced me it was just one of the guys taking a bathroom break. Eventually, I fell back asleep. In the morning, I didn't say anything. Neither did Lily. But at breakfast, Jonah had this haunted look on his face, like he was dying to say something. He told us someone had been walking around our tent the night before. Tessa immediately nodded, saying she heard it too. Footsteps circling, pausing, and possibly more than one person. I asked if anyone had gotten up to pee during the night. Chris said he had, but added something strange. He thought he saw someone crouching near the fire pit just before dawn. That set us all off. We started searching the area around camp. In the soft earth surrounding the tents, we found prints. Several. Human-shaped, some in boots, but one in particular was unmistakable. Barefoot, no shoe tread at all, pressed clearly in damp soil. They led toward the woods and just stopped. We nervously joked that maybe it was just some wandering hiker or a prankster, but no one really believed that. That night, we stayed up later than before, fire blazing, flashlights close at hand. Around 2 a.m., we heard the leaves again. Something or someone was walking nearby. Then came a voice. It was low, too quiet to make out, but undeniably human. Jonah snapped on his flashlight and caught a glimpse. A man, completely naked, crouched behind a nearby tree. As soon as the beam hit him, he scurried away like a startled animal. We were frozen in disbelief. No one moved. It felt safer to stay clustered by the fire than split into separate tents. Tessa whispered that maybe we should pack and hike out, but Jonah and I agreed that wandering through unfamiliar woods at night was a bad idea. That kind of fear, the fear of being watched from darkness, followed. It's paralyzing. I didn't sleep at all. At some point past 3 a.m., I heard more leaves crunching very slowly. I muttered under my breath, "Please just be a deer." Then I heard it. A voice from the woods. "I see you guys." It wasn't one of my friends. I held my breath, unsure if anyone else had heard it too. Then, something I never could have expected. The fabric of my tent shifted, ever so slightly. I looked toward the zipper. It was moving. Someone was slowly unzipping my tent. I screamed, as loud as I've ever screamed, and the others joined in, everyone yelling in confusion and panic. Whoever it was fled. I never saw them. I zipped the tent back up and waited. No more sounds. No breathing. Just terror. By the time the sky began to lighten, I still hadn't closed my eyes. As soon as we had enough visibility, we packed everything in record time and started the long hike out. No one spoke much. At the ranger outpost, we told the first officer we saw. He listened quietly, then said, "Yeah, there've been reports." He mentioned that others had seen someone, maybe more than one, living out there. Sometimes they just stole gear. Other times, he didn't say. We tried to laugh it off in the car, but no one meant it. I still think about that zipper, about the man in the woods, about what might have happened if I hadn't screamed. I haven't been camping since. I don't think I ever will.